My name is Michael Jordan, and I'm going to take you through building a clinical case using Adobe Flash software. First thing we're going to do is open the program. There should be a blank file that you can get, and when we're done with this, there's also going to be the finished tutorial that you can look through. And you can use either one to build your clinical case depending on what you're trying to do. So we're just going to open this, and this is an HTML5 canvas if you wanted to create a new one. We have to use this because it's just the most compatible with all devices, portable devices, things like that. So we're going to open this here, and I kind of already have it started a little bit. I'm going to fit it in the window so I can see everything, and just to kind of give you like a description of the layout. Here is like what it's going to look like in the web browser. Down here is kind of like the bones of the program, or the guts of it, I guess you could say. It's all the code writing. And a lot of that I've already have started, and as I'm building the program and go through it, I'll show you how to do that. And then over here is kind of like your design panel, you could say, for text or imaging or whatever. And then here's your library for all the buttons that we're going to have, the graphics and the images. So first thing, this is going to be like the intro page to whoever the user is going to be. And how I kind of have it laid out is, right now it's a tutorial case 1, but say it was thorax or abdomen. It could be abdomen case 2, thorax case 3, whatever. Then we have a scenario, chief complaint, HPI, past medical history. The scenario is just kind of to give the user an idea of what they are, what they're doing. And I have an example written there. The chief complaint is what the patient comes in complaining of, using their own words. The history of present illness and the past medical history are pretty self-explanatory. But this is for you to kind of make your own. This is going to go along with the case and the images that you use. So this is pretty free, I guess you could say, in what you want to write. Just try to make it consistent. And I kind of have all the descriptions there that you can use. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is do question 1, and I kind of already have the slider built in, so all that coding is done. But what we need to do is we need to insert multiple layers. So to insert a new layer, you just go down here to the new layer button, and it doesn't really matter how many you have right now because we can always delete them later. I'm going to just expand this a little bit to see a little bit better. We'll do a few more here. And these layer numbers, they don't matter what order they're in. This is more for you just to help lay it out yourself so you don't get confused or whatever. It's usually not a big deal that 20 is before 19 or whatever like that. Okay, so for question 1, I already have my images kind of set up. So on my desktop here, I have the tutorial images, and I have question 1 images already set up, and I have my images already picked out. And then we're going to bring them into the library under the Q1 images. So what I did here is, you can see the images are labeled 62, 64, 66. I got all of the images, but the slices were so thin that I thought I would just delete every other picture because it becomes kind of tedious if the image slices are too small for what you're trying to do. So what we're going to do is just copy all these into the Q1 images, and it'll import them there. So you don't have to worry about that. And then you'll be able to see here I have all the images in order. And it kind of gives you a preview up here of what the images are going to look like. So this is where it becomes kind of tedious. We have to drag and drop each of these images into the frame. And how we do that is by inserting it in each of these frames. So this is like frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and you can kind of think of this as a timeline. So here's frame 1, and then we're going to start on frame 2, and what we need to do is insert a keyframe. And a keyframe kind of tells the program, like, hey, something's changing in the program, and it needs to kind of like almost reload or update what's ever on this screen. So I'm just going to go through and enter these keyframes, and I'm going to enter them successfully. So like the first image keyframe will be here, the second image keyframe will be here, third, fourth, fifth, and so on and so forth, and you can just follow along. Just counting there how many frames I need. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I need 18. Okay, so I think I have enough. So now I'm going to start bringing the images in, and you can name these if you want, but you don't really need to. It's just kind of for your own purposes. So we're going to drag and drop it in, and what the size we're going to use is 600 by 600 pixels. So you need to go to this info button, or you can just go right here to transform. We're going to do 600 by 600 to keep it perfectly square, and then we're going to align it to the right of the edge, and then also to the top edge, and that way it's going to be consistent through our images. And here's another thing that's kind of tedious too. You usually need to insert a keyframe after the image as well, because it's going to try to pull this image through the rest of these keyframes. So what you want it to say is like, okay, on keyframe 2 I want this image, but on keyframe 3 I do not want this image. So you insert a new keyframe with a blank image. I'm just going to go do that right now because it's going to keep popping up. So we almost have to double keyframe each of these. Okay, now that we got each of them double keyframed, it should go pretty smoothly. So this is the tedious part, just dragging and dropping all of these images. Sometimes I just copy and paste it, and it makes it easier so you don't have to click as much. Okay, now we got all of our images in there. You can kind of see how it plays like a movie. Scrolling through the images. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set our slider bar so it's only on frame 2, and we need to get it all the way to frame 19. So what we do for that is we just go to the slider layer, click on frame 19 and hit insert keyframe. So it shows the slider bar is now in all of these images. I'm bringing it out one farther right now, just drag and drop it, just so it's all the same on these 9 images. Okay. So make sure we're still recording. Okay, now that we got that done, we're going to go through and label this image and then write a question along with it. So we'll just put here question 1. Then we're going to do 4 answers, A, B, C, D. So we'll just label this A1, B1, C1, and D1. And the fact that I moved these layers down, it really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is, say, if I was to put a D on the screen in frame 2, it would lay over top of the image since it's a higher layer. And that's another reason why we have this slider and all of these up here, is because they're at the forefront of the image, so they'll never be covered by one of these images down here. Okay. So for question 1, I got these set of images because you can see a couple of the valves. You can see the aortic valve, the mitral valve, and the tricuspid valve pretty clearly. So for instance, if we want to add a question, we're just going to insert a keyframe again. In question 1, we're going to put in a text box. And we can put it wherever we like. Make sure it's the right font, that's fine. So we'll do question 1 here and say, please identify the mitral valve. Okay. Make this text box a little bit smaller, and there we have it. I don't want this to be bolded actually. I'll just do regular. Okay, and then you see you can move it freely wherever you like. Okay, and then as far as the buttons go, I'm actually just going to move these all into one layer. It's a little simpler that way. Q1 buttons. We're going to insert a keyframe again. And then I already have the buttons uploaded in the library, so you don't have to create any. So we're just going to drag out and drop all of these out here. And then we can zoom in a little bit if we need to get it a little clearer. Okay, zoom back out again. So they're not all aligned perfectly, so what we can do is you highlight all of them and they'll all move at once. But also we can go over here to align, and we don't want to align it to the stage because it's going to use the width of the stage. So we click off that, and we just can say distribute to the horizontal center, so now they're all spaced evenly. Okay, so now we got that down, and now we need to label the images so the user can identify. So we're going to create another layer here. We're going to call these Q1 graphics. Actually, I'm going to label this A1 graphic because I'm going to separate these out. It makes it a little easier that way. insert a keyframe again, and I already have some of the graphics uploaded, and I'll show you how to make new ones later so it's not so hard. So we're going to pull out here A1, and obviously you can choose what you want to label, but so for A1 we'll just label the aortic valve here. So I'm just going to bring this over here, and I'm going to zoom in my screen so I can get a little closer and get a little more detailed. So you can see in frame 2 here, we don't really see the aortic valve, so I might not want to start the label there. It seems we can really get a good picture of it maybe here around frame 4. So what I'm going to do is insert another keyframe here. Then I'm going to remove this keyframe. Oops, not remove frame. Clear keyframe, I guess I should say. So now that's gone, and then on frame 4 is when the label starts. And say you want to move where the A is relative to the arrow. What we have to do is double click on the graphic, and you can see we have these different components. And if I want to move the A, I can just do this. Or if I want to rotate the arrow, you have to highlight the entire arrow, because if you just highlight this piece, it's only going to rotate this piece. So you have to be very specific. So you highlight the whole arrow. I'm going to deselect the A, and I'm going to go over here to this rotate button, and then you can just rotate your arrow as you would like. So say I want to change it to, maybe I'll change it to right here so it doesn't get in the middle of the image. And I'm going to pull my A down, kind of realign it about right there, and then back out. And then we have this identified graphic now. So as I'm going through the image, I want to kind of change the location of this graphic to follow the valve. So you can see here, I'm going to zoom in a little closer because it kind of gets a little picky. So we're going to go right here. And then we're going to kind of follow it over to about right here. Then after that, maybe we'll go a little bit more. Then after that, we want it to be done because pretty much the aortic valve is no longer in the screen. So we're going to insert a keyframe, and then we're just going to delete it. And that way when we zoom back out or fit it in the window, we'll just go to 100% right now so we can see. You see the A moving along the aortic valve, so the user knows the aortic valve is what's being identified. So it's kind of choppy, you can see, with the movement of it because we're moving the frames. So what we do is we can highlight these frames and we can create a motion tween. Oops, sorry, not a motion tween. We want to create a classic tween. Move motion tween. I'm going to highlight all these and create a classic tween. Sorry about that. And that way, it kind of fills in the gaps of you moving, so it's a lot smoother transition. So it's not as choppy. See, between these frames here, it's moving, and the computer just kind of fills in the blanks. So it's a very smooth transition. Okay, so now that we got the A1 graphic down, and you can see how that's done, I'm just going to go through and continue labeling the other valves for the question. And since we only have 3 valves in this image, I'm only going to use A, B, and C. We're going to do aortic, we have the tricuspid, and then we have the mitral here. So I'm going to go and just continue to do that. Okay, so now we have the mitral labeled as B, and then now we're going to do the tricuspid as C. The tricuspid's a little harder to see, so we're kind of just going to try to get the general area of it. You can see it a little bit, but so I just created a classic tween again. So now, if I zoom out to fit in the window, we can see all of our answers in the image. So now that we don't have D, I'm going to remove D and kind of just move over A, B, and C. Okay. So as the user is going through this and picking the images, they're going to be using this slider up here, and we're going to set that up later. But then after the user selects their answer, they're going to want to go to, to find the correct answer. So what we do is, what I'm going to do really quick is put all of question 1 in a folder. We name this question 1 text. Okay, so there, now we're all in there. So it makes it just a little cleaner when you're going through everything. If you want to like eliminate question 1 so this down here doesn't get so busy. Okay, so we got question 1, and then now we're going to do the answer section. And what I do for the answer section, I just completely copy this entire section and almost double it. But what I want to do is insert keyframes here, and it'll make the copying and pasting a lot easier, because if you don't insert the keyframes, it'll expand the rest of these frames. So you have to insert these keyframes, and it'll just make it a lot cleaner transition. So we got all these keyframes here. So what I'm going to do is just copy actually we want to move these keyframes 1 back. There we go. So I'm going to copy this entire section here. Okay. Copy frames, and then what I'm going to do is insert it, paste these frames here. So we kind of have it doubled up here. So this is going to be the question portion. Okay, and then once they click their answer, they're going to go to the answer portion. So it's right now it's exactly the same, but we're going to edit it a little bit to show the correct answer. So we're just going to adjust this text, but we're going to add another text to this. And we'll just label what the valves are. B was the mitral valve. and C was the tricuspid valve. Okay, and then we can just say the correct answer was B, mitral valve. That's all we need. You can do more of an explanation if you want to, but just for the tutorial purposes, we'll just make it simple. So this is something that's interesting about the using the HTML. The text doesn't wrap automatically, so when you see I go out of this text box, that little last part that had to go to the second line disappeared. So what you just need to do is just go to the beginning of the new text line and hit enter and expand this out a little bit, and then it'll be corrected. It's kind of annoying, but it's just something that is built in the program we have to do. So now we have the correct answer. Okay, that's fine. And we don't need any more buttons up here because they're not going to be clicking these buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into these buttons like I went into these graphics over here. And we're going to go over how to make buttons later. But what I'm going to do is just copy this, or copy these three. Or no, just copy this one. Or actually, yeah, I'm just going to copy this. And I'm just going to paste it. So this is no longer a button, this is just a graphic. So what I'm going to try to do is, I'm just going to paste a couple of these. You have to highlight the whole thing when you're moving it. Okay, so this is going to be answer A, this will be answer B, and this will be answer C. Since B was correct, what I like to do is I'll just highlight over it. I'll deselect the text. In the outline, I'll just make a green color for correct. And then for C, I'll make the outline red since it was wrong. And A, I'll do the same thing. And you just kind of want to line them up in the same location that they were on the previous page, so there's no differences between the two. Oops. Okay. So now we're going to have our answer to question one essentially. These three. Okay, and then we're going to want the slider to expand again. So we're going to insert a keyframe out here. And then that way the slider will again be with these images. And we're going to go over how to write the code on those in a little bit. Okay, so right now we have question one done. And now we're going to go to question two. Now question two, we're not going to have this scroller, we're just going to have a static image because maybe for some reason you just want to use a static image. And that's a little different on how we have to do that. It's a little easier because we don't have to use the slider. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So this is really nice since we had all those in question one. We can just minimize it. And I guess I'll create another folder for the answer. Again, this down here is just for your organization, not necessarily important. Let's see if it took that. So now let's see how clean it looks. Okay, so I just want to remember the last layer we were at. So this is where it's going to start again. So we're going to insert a keyframe, and we're going to kind of do what we did before. And what I like to do is use this text layer and kind of copy this over just so we're at the same location and the text isn't jumping all around when we're going from question to question. So I place that in place. Okay. And we're going to change this to question 2. And I already have the image picked out for question 2. We'll go over here to our images. And we're going to have to drag and drop again. So question 2, tutorial images, Q2 images. And we're in there. Okay. So I'm going to drag and drop that. And again, we're going to want this to be 600 by 600 pixels. And it's important to do the pixels and not the percentage, because sometimes when I get the images, they're not 512 by 512. So when I adjust them by percentage, it's going to adjust based off what these numbers were originally. Okay, and then we're just going to align this like we did the other images. Have to align to the stage again. Okay. And we're going to zoom in and replace these buttons because we don't want to use the question 1 buttons. And that'll be important later when we're doing the coding. So what I want to do is I already have these buttons built in. Just going to drag and drop these in here. Okay. Okay. Just double check to make sure these are all different buttons. Okay. So now we're just going to label image, and we don't want the slider bar to be here. So what we're just going to do is we're just going to clear this keyframe. Okay, so the slider is still, actually insert a blank keyframe, sorry. So the slider is still in the first image, but now that we're in the second image, it's no longer there. Okay, so now we'll just go ahead and label our image. I guess the question we'll do for this is just identify the middle lobe of the lung. This is an image of the right lobe, and we'll be able to see that when we zoom in a little bit. And you can see here the fissure, so this would be your transverse fissure right here, and then this would be your oblique fissure, upper lobe, lower lobe, middle lobe. So we're just going to label these lobes. And you can use whatever font size you want, but just try to keep it consistent. And we're going to use this red color here. I'm just going to do A. And what I like to do with these is add a drop shadow because it makes it stick out of the image more. The white image specifically. And I'll do one without a drop shadow just so you can see the difference. Oops. And you can just see between the two, it doesn't really stick out as much, kind of blends in. So I like to go down here to the filters and just add the drop shadow. Okay. And since these aren't graphics or images, you can be, and it's just text, it's a little easier just to copy and paste going through these. So we're just going to Command Z and Command V, and we'll just change this to C. Okay. So we have our 3 images, static image. Sorry, we'll change this back to white. Okay. Now I'm just going to show you, we're only going to do 3 here, but in case you wanted to create a button, say you had an answer you wanted to be A, B, C, D, E, F, or whatever. I only have it up to D. So I'm going to just show you how to create a button real quick. And you have to do this pretty specifically because this is considered like a graphic, so there's code tied to it. So I can't just copy this and change it and make another one because it's going to copy and change both of them. So what I'm going to do here is just zoom in and show you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to double click on the button, and it kind of takes you into the code of the buttons. And how each of these buttons are set up is when there's no mouse over it, it's just white, but when you hover over it, it's going to change gray. So what we need to do is just copy this button here, Command C. We need to get out of this frame, and we can just paste it here. So now we just have the text box with the text in it. We want to modify, convert to symbol, button, and say you want this to be E. So we're going to go E2. There's going to be the E button for question 2. We're going to hit OK. And we're going to just go in and edit this. Change this to E. And then you're going to want to enter a keyframe on the over button. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. Change this background color to this gray over here. Show you that again just so we click the right one. It's this 6C paint. Okay. And then this is originally a 20 by 20 box, so we're just going to adjust it back to what it was. And then that way we have when you're over it's white, and when you're not over it's white, and then when you're over it turns gray. So that's pretty simple how to create a button. And then it'll be in your library. Right here it is, and we can move it to the E2 buttons if that's what we want to do. Okay, I'm going to save this as the final, just so you can look at the beginning and at the end. Okay, and then say we wanted to create a new graphic. You have to create a new graphic for each image. And say we wanted to label these fissures and we're moving through the image. You can just pull out any one of these, and it's going to be the same concept essentially. We're going to zoom in on the graphic. We have to go into the graphic, and we're going to highlight the whole thing, copy it, Control C, and then back out. We can delete this, and then we're going to repaste it. Now what we need to do is we need to convert this to a symbol, but instead of a button, we want to convert it to a graphic. So we're going to say, how I have these labeled arrow A1, we'll call this arrow A2. And this is if you want to make arrows for the other questions or whatever you need them for. So OK there, and now we have an A2 graphic, and we can bring this down here. And that way you can create graphics, and you can drag this over wherever you want. And then remember, we can go in and edit it if we don't like the direction of the arrow. Highlight the whole thing, deselect the A, and then use this to rotate. We want it there, say we're going to move it here. You can also change it. Say if I don't want to say A1 and I'm going to label something in the answer section, you can say, you know, right upper lobe. You can change it to RUL. And when you do that, that's fine. A little. That's fine, but when you just go to these properties, I would just recommend changing it to RUL. That way you don't get confused on what's what. So when you go back to the library, it's now arrow right upper lobe. Okay, since we don't need that for this section, I'm just going to delete it. But at least you know how to make new graphics and new buttons, because you might want to do that. Okay, so now we got this. I'm going to insert a new layer for our answer. I'm going to insert another keyframe, and I'm essentially just going to copy this entire screen because it's going to be the same. Oops. Paste in place. That way it's the same. It's both overlapped. Okay. Identify the middle lobe. And now I'm going to zoom in to make sure these buttons aren't buttons anymore. And what you can also do with these buttons, instead of copying and pasting, you can do this thing. It's called break apart. And it kind of removes, it's no longer a button anymore. I guess this is a little simpler way to do it, but I just wanted to show you both ways. So we're going to break these apart. And then what's our answer going to be? A. So B and C are wrong, so we're going to do like we did last time and change their outlines to red. And then A is correct, so we're going to change its outline to green. Okay, and then we can make our explanation again, whatever we want it to be. I usually like to just identify what I would labeled. So this is going to be right middle lobe. B would be our right upper lobe. And then C would be our right lower lobe. Okay, and then the correct answer is A. You can identify, you can put whatever explanation you want here. You can go into more in depth, less in depth. It just depends. Whatever you want to, what point you're trying to get across. You can identify the right middle lobe by looking at the transverse and oblique fissures, whatever. And then remember, again, this text doesn't wrap on its own, so we have to hit enter at the beginning of these lines. And then you kind of want to space this out because it expands a little bit. And then there you go. So same image, question, answer. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to put a, oops, trash that layer. I'm going to just create a folder for question 2. Okay, and then that way we have our question 2 and question 1 answer. Just makes it a little simpler. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I forgot to go in here. And I need to add a next button so we can go to the next image. Because see, on the question side of it, you're going to pick one of these answers, and that's going to control you to the answer section. But once you're into the answer section, these buttons no longer work. So we have to have a next button. So we're going to go on the question 1 answer, question 1 buttons, and then I already have the next buttons generated. So we're just going to put this in the corner. And this can, where you put this, it just depends on how long your answer or justification is. So we'll put that there. And then we're also going to need one here. Question 2. Oops, I put the wrong next in the other one. So this is the number 2 next. Then we're going to go back here for the first one. Okay, so we're going to try to put these in the same spot, and then how you can do that is it tells you where it is on the screen. So right now we're at 90265, so I'm just going to copy that to this next button. And then that way we're going to be in the same spot, so it's not jumping all over the place and just looks a little bit cleaner. So now they're in the same spot, so it doesn't look so messy. Okay, change this to 20, it wasn't the same font. And this got messed up again. Okay, so now we basically have the program built as we want it, but now we need to put in the coding, so when we go to operate this thing, the slider works as it's supposed to, and all the buttons take you where they're supposed to go. And I guess also I usually do like a summary page here at the end. So after this last scene, we'll just hit it, insert a keyframe, and then you can just put whatever you want here. Usually put this in a little bigger font, put it at 44, doesn't really matter. Tutorial case over, and then go back down to 20, and I usually do a little case summary, and then what I like to, oh yeah, I forgot this is, we have to make two separate text boxes when you do different size text or alignments. It's just the way the program works. So align that to the center, and then create a separate text box. Oops. With our actual text in it. And usually for the end of the cases, I usually just like to draw some conclusions, and it's basically maybe there was something in the HPI or something in the past medical history that could have led you to this differential diagnosis or whatever you want it to be. So just put case summary here, and then pertinent findings maybe. So we'll just throw that there. It'll probably be a little longer, so you're going to want it on the left. It'll probably be more in a paragraph form. Then also I have a restart button, and this is going to take you back to the beginning of the beginning of the case. So just line that in the center. Okay, so we have that. So now we're going to start working on the bones of the program. So something interesting about using Adobe to make HTML. This is frame 1 in Adobe, but according to HTML, it's frame 0. So anything you do, you always have to subtract 1 frame from it. And then I want to make this outline the entire length. So now the outline goes the entire length of the program. Okay. So we're going to start on our action script here. And usually the action script, it's going to line up with our question. So we're going to have a new keyframe with this new slider here. Now I'm going to walk you through the action script. I've generated it in the program, and I'm going to kind of explain to you what I did. So let's just go through it here. So frame 1, this stop, it tells you once it gets in the program to stop. Don't do anything until the user interacts. And let me make this just a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm just going to put it right here. So it tells the user when we get in to stop, and don't do anything until the user clicks. And when it clicks on the enter key, it'll move a frame, whatever frame you tell it. And technically we want to go to frame 2 in Adobe, but frame 1 in HTML, so we need to take a step back and subtract 1. Okay, so once they hit enter, then they're going to go into the first question here. Okay, and this code right here is just something we're going to keep copying and pasting. This is for the slider, and then this is for the questions. Okay, just tells you, the A1 button. When he clicks the A1 button, you're going to go to this frame and whatnot. Same for B and C. Now, if you wanted to add a button, we can do that. You can either copy and paste and just replace it with D, 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 or you can do a code snippet and go to HTML canvas, timeline navigation, um, click to go to frame and stop, and then we'll have to select a button on stage, which would be the D1 button. And when you do that, you just have to fill in the blanks, but I usually just like to copy and paste. So this is for the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question, or the answer part, we're going to have to write a new action script for the slider because we don't want it to go back over the original question. We just want it to slide over the answer part. So we just have to set in a new set of values. And remember, it's subtracting 1. So we want it to start on frame 20, aka 19 in HTML. We want it to end on frame 37, aka 36 in HTML. So that's what we do. And you can see from the other beginning part of the question, the values are different. And then here is the next function, and this is for our next button. And then this just tells the user no matter what frame you're on when you're sliding through, as long as you click this next button, it's going to take you to the next question. And these buttons no longer work because we detach them from their button functions. Those are just text. Okay, so then we click next, and it's going to take us to this question. And now we don't have a slider anymore, so we just have the buttons. And this is the same code here, except you can notice instead of C1, 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 it'll now say C2, C2, C2. And you have to be consistent with this. And this matches up with our instance name and instance of. Okay. So we have those buttons, and once you click those buttons, it's going to want to go to the next frame, frame 39, but according to HTML 38. So then here's our answer page. We have the next button again, and the next button is just going to take you to the final page. And you'll have this finished tutorial to go over it and look through the code yourself, and you might be able to figure it out a little bit more going through it on your own. This is something that tutorials kind of helped on, but just going through it and doing it on my own helped a lot more. So what this is saying is this restart button is going to take us to frame 0, which is the beginning. Okay, so you can go through this code on your own. Everything's pretty much built in already. It's just a matter of copying and pasting and then changing the slide numbers and or the button names. And if you have any questions, of course, you can just email me. I'll have my email attached to this video. So now we have the actions done. So we're going to want to save this, and then we're just going to test it. And I always like to test it in the browser because that's what the user is going to be using as the browser. So you want to make sure it looks okay. Firefox or Chrome are the best. It doesn't really work with Internet Explorer, so we're going to export it there. And then it loads here, and we'll go full screen. So we have our tutorial case 1, our scenario, whatever. We'll click enter. Then we're going to go to the first question. And this is when the user can slide through. We'll see A, our aortic, B, our mitral, C, our tricuspid. And then the user can scroll back and forth. And this is nice too because they can get a good orientation of where they are. And then they can also see relative structures like, okay, where's the right ventricle? I'm not really sure. Right there maybe, mostly anterior. So that must be the tricuspid. This is the aortic valve. So, this must be the left ventricle, left atrium, mitral valve. So the user is going to pick an answer. Since we know what the answer is, we'll pick B, mitral valve. That highlighted it for us. And then now it goes through and labels whatever was labeled in the question, and then you can give some sort of explanation as to why that's the answer, and then maybe hints or tips. Okay, and then we're going to go to our next question. Now this is our static image, and now it's asking us to identify the middle lobe. And it's nice to throw in these static images, obviously, because on the test, this is most likely what they're going to have. So it's nice to have the first couple of questions be the scrollable images, and then the last few maybe be the static images, just to test their knowledge and see what they've gained. So identify the middle lobe, we know that's A, and that gives us an explanation, blah, blah, blah. Then we hit next, and now our case tutorial is over, and we can either, in the website, you'll be able to go to another case, or we can just restart, and it'll take us right back to the beginning. We can go through it again. So that's the tutorial. If there's any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have my email attached to this, and hope I can answer any questions you have. All right, thank you.